Boys and girls, we're back, and it is tier list time. There obviously hasn't been any content that I'm particularly interested in Honkai Star Rail. I didn't pull for an AXA, and Hugo Vlad is coming next week, so I'll definitely be pulling for that. There'll be a video on Friday for that one as well, but a little tier list to tie you guys over since they tend to do relatively well. So what are we doing this time? It's going to be drive discs. I thought it'd be kind of interesting to talk about which discs I think are really good, which ones aren't so good, and ones that have been outclassed and just are complete trash. So let's go through the actual category, shall we? So 2-piece and 4-piece generally useful, or generically useful, I should say. So it's pretty simple, just that the 2-piece and the 4-piece are, to this day, still quite useful. You know, you still see them used in characters today. They haven't really been power crept per se. And yeah, just generally really good discs, and it doesn't feel the worst to farm them, essentially. 2-piece and 4-piece specifically useful. So this is similar to the one above, but more tied to discs which are very specific to units that make units really strong. So a good example off the bat that I could talk about would be Branch and Blade Song, right? The 2-piece is really good, don't get me wrong, but the 4-piece is quite niche and is quite tied to Miyabi in particular. Like, you can't just slap that on any ice DPS and it's going to be the best. That's just not how that disc works. So in that case, Branch and Blade Song would go here, right? Spoiler alert. Next one is that the 2-piece is useful. The 4-piece is whatever in that case. The 2-piece specifically is what is good about this disc. Next one is outclassed, where some of the newer discs are just better than what the old ones could provide. And then Lamau is just, you know, this disc is trash. Okay, and first up is Phaeton's Melody. Now this one is going to go specifically here. So the 2-piece is decent. 8% anomaly mastery is unique. No other 2-piece disc drive has 8% anomaly. And you can argue that 8% anomaly for some characters could maybe offset the disc drive 6. You'd have to do some calculation on that per character, but it allows for some characters to not have to run the disc 6 as anomaly mastery. I don't know. Even then, I think it's a push. The reason this disc is here is that it's specifically really good for Vivian. Like, it's purpose built for Vivian. My Vivian right now doesn't have a anomaly mastery disc 6, and it works perfectly fine because she gets so much anomaly mastery from her kit, and then 8% from the disc drive as well. The 4-piece is essentially purpose built for her, so I can't just say the 2-piece is useful. I can't say it's outclassed, so it kind of has to go here. Now, outside of the character, no one else is really going to use this, if I'm being honest. Unless you have another character which is like an off-field ether damage character. It's way too niche, so it has to go here. Okay, let's talk about Shadow Harmony. Now, at first glance, you might think this is very similar to Phaeton's Melody, right? Being very specific to Soldier Zero Ambi. But the truth is, it's actually generic enough that Trigger can also use it because she does aftershocks. And the actual 4-piece effect is very strong. 12% attack and 12% crit rate for just doing a dash attack or an aftershock. I mean, we don't know what characters are going to come in the future, whether they will use the aftershock effect, but doing dash attacks is not difficult. You know, dodging is something you should be doing. So yeah, I can see this actually being very, very good later on if there are characters that can utilize it. It's generic enough. It makes sense as a 4-piece for some characters. So I think it can go here. This is kind of a predictive top rank here. Realistically, it should probably go down here in front of Phaeton's Melody. But I'm going to make a prediction and say it goes up here. Okay, next up is Astral Voice. The drive disc, which at a first glance looks like it's made specifically for Astrial, and it's fair to say, really, just looking at how The buff stacks with quick assist. She can do quick assist like crazy. It makes sense, right? But it's also no surprise that it's fantastic for pretty much every other support. So Nicole, Lucy, they all can use this. You know, being able to do a quick assist at least 2 times within that 15-minute mark of the buff already gives you a better buff than what we could use before. So in pretty much all cases, this is number 1. And I mean, yeah, it's just very, very generically strong. And until they release another set for supports, it seems like pretty much everyone is going to be running this. And what was nice about it, really, when you think about it, was that it came out with Branch and Blade Song. So while everyone was farming for Miyabi, they were also just farming this set. So most people should have a ton of them, which is really, really nice. Okay, next up is Branch and Blade Song. Now, this is in a weird spot because it's 2-piece. That free crit damage is SSS tier. Pretty much look at any of the top builds for a crit-based character. They're going to be trying to use this as the 2-piece of choice, right? Everyone loves to use Branch and Blade Song for its 2-piece. But its 4-piece is extremely strong, but it's kind of locked behind the fact that you really just have to be Miyabi. Or if they make another crit and anomaly character who uses the ice attribute, then they could also use this. But at the end of the day, being able to apply freeze or shatter and then gain like 12% crit rate, it's kind of insane. But yeah, like you can't just plop it on Ellen and it's going to be better than what Ellen can run. So unfortunately, it is very specifically tied to Miyabi. But don't get me wrong, the 2-piece is amazing. You know, if there was a tier which is like the best 2-piece, this would go here as well. Okay, next up we have Chaos Jazz. Now, again, this is in a very weird spot because it is one of 2 of the anomaly proficiency 2-pieces, which means any anomaly character, 99% of the time is going to want one of these, or they're going to want Freedom Blues, right? Because they both give the same 2-piece. However, I would say Chaos Jazz, being fire and electric specifically, it's specifically for off-field characters as well, is a bit too niche. Like Bernice is still definitely really strong, and she works really well in anomaly comps in general. So in some ways you could say this belongs up here, but for now I'm going to put it here because without a doubt the 2-piece is what makes this disc really good. Until they release another fire character or another electric character who does off-field damage outside of Bernice, I think then you can move it up, but I think by then they would probably make another one. Okay, next up is Polar Metal. Now, this is one of the many 10% elemental damage discs for that 2-piece. Obviously, their 4-pieces differ between discs, but for the most part, they have the same 2-piece. So let's quickly talk about that 2-piece, because on paper, it doesn't seem too bad. But when you think about it from a character's point of view, there's a reason why elemental damage 2-piece has really fallen off. If you're a crit-based character, you're going to either want Woodpecker to help cap out your crit, or you're going to want Branch and Blade Song 2-piece to push your crit damage up. That's just a given. Then a third option is usually attack percent, and attack percent and damage percent, the elemental damage, is very close in terms of damage difference most of the time. So if you're already down that route where you have to choose between the elemental damage or the attack damage, or attack percent, sorry, you're really going to just go for attack percent because more than likely you're going to have more of the attack percent pieces that you can roll. You don't really want to go out there and farm specifically for an element piece just because they're not really used anymore, right? The most recent attack percent disc is the Astral Voice, which came with Miyabi. So most people have at least some pieces, right? And these are generically useful. So it's kind of why I have to put it in Outclassed, because even for the character it was, I guess, designed for, being Ellen, she kind of just prefers having the Woodpecker anyways. because Woodpecker is much easier to trigger, whereas this one has to trigger specifically off of shattering and freezing. So yeah, not great. Not great. Next up is Fanged Metal. Now, again, the two-piece is the same. The only difference is that the four-piece is actually very, very generic. So right now, the only two physical anomaly units we have is obviously Jane Doe, and you have Piper as well. Now, Billy is not really going to run this because although he can trigger Assault, it doesn't really make sense to run this instead of something which is just going to give him a ton of crit. So I kind of want to just kind of put this here because it's definitely still useful, but the two-piece is kind of whatever. So realistically, I'm going to have to put in Outclassed. The issue is right now, Piper is still usable, and Jane Doe has gained a lot of power with the introduction of Vivian. She's much more fun to use with Vivian. The damage is insane. So I kind of want to teeter this in between. There needs to be maybe another category, but I really can't be bothered. So I'm going to put it in the Outclass section. Okay, next up is Chaotic Metal. So it follows the same vein as these two, just ether damage. However, its four-piece is actually generically decent. But you have to think, this is a really old disc. If they make another ether damage character who scales off crit, they're probably going to make another disc for them. And that disc will probably fall more in line with something like a Branch and Blade Song. Because just think about Branch and Blade Song. It gives, without even taking into consideration the 16% from the two-piece, the four-piece itself gives 30% crit damage unconditionally. And then whenever you trigger Freeze and Shatter, it gives another 12% crit rate. Now, flip that on its head and say, you're just going to make Branch and Blade Song, but for ether. That would outclass this disc tremendously already. Right, 25.5% crit damage versus an easy 30% without the two-piece. So straight away there, it's been outclassed, but for its day and generically, it was actually really good. But it definitely goes here now. Okay, next up is Freedom Blues. Now, this is basically the counterpart to Chaos Jazz in that the two-piece is 30 anomaly proficiency. However, the four-piece is definitely more tailored towards a support. So in an ideal world, you would have, let's say for Nicole, you would have an ether anomaly-based character. So let's just say Vivian as a main DPS, and you could run Nicole as your support with this set on. And it would reduce the, I guess, anomaly build-up resistance on the main target so that your main DPS can do more damage. But this is very restrictive because if you wanted to run, let's say Lucy, but your main DPS is going to be Jane Doe, well, you can't really run this four-piece because it's not doing anything. Because it's going to reduce the anomaly build-up res for fire, but Jane Doe is physical. So it's kind of meh in that sense now. You don't really see many people using it for its four-piece at all. So it has to go here because the two-piece is still extremely useful, you know. Look at Vivian, for example. Most people are either running two-piece as this or two-piece as this. It doesn't really matter. They're interchangeable. No one's really using this for the four-piece anymore. With the advent of Astral Voice, there's just no need to run this realistically. Next up, we have Hormone Punk. This is another one of the attack 10%. So I'm actually going to just put this here for now because attack 10% is still useful, definitely. The main reason it's this high up is that with the upcoming character being Vlad or Hugo, whatever you want to call him, this might actually see some play as a four-piece. It's an option. Will it be the best? I don't 100% know just yet. More realistically, it's probably going to be Woodpecker, but this is an option because I guess Hugo is such a interesting character from a design perspective for ZZZ. No other character is as bursty or nukey as he is. So the four-piece, it makes some sense. You know, 25% attack is no joke just for switching in. So Who knows? Who knows? Maybe it turns out to really do, like, actually be the best for Hugo. But it's two pieces what is keeping it up here for now, at least. Okay, next up is Infernal Metal. And this falls into the elemental damage category for the 2-piece, so that's whatever. The 4-piece on paper looks kind of crazy. You know, upon hitting a burning enemy, 28% crit rate is quite a lot. But when you think about it, in terms of the newer characters, most new characters come with a lot of crit rate built in. And also a lot of crit from their Wenjins as well. So in a lot of cases, Infernal Metal is almost giving too much crit rate. The trigger actually had a very similar problem when people were running with the Shadow Harmony set, because it was almost giving too much crit rate that it was causing people to overcap. So yeah, it's kind of a weird situation. I just think this one really has just been outclassed. The effect is too simple for today. 28% crit realistically is a bit too much. So yeah, not that great. And you really have to run multiple fire characters to get really consistent burns, because keeping up that burn effect is going to be difficult. That 8 seconds, it can easily run out if you're not keeping an eye on it, I guess. Okay, next up is Protopunk. Now this is a very, very weird set, because outside of Caesar, defenders as a, I guess, archetype or class in this game is kind of weird. I almost think that ZZZ made a mistake when making the defender class, because they fall into a situation where why would you run a defender when you can run a support to give you more damage, right? And just dodge everything, use iframes. And then why would you use a defender over a stunner? Kind of almost doesn't really make sense. Defenders kind of fall into a spot where they just kind of don't belong anywhere. Caesar is unique because her shield is so good, and the only content where shield really actually matters is probably tower, and that's not like that's just a flex thing, right? It's pretty easy to get all of the rewards you want from it without needing a ton of investment or going really hard to get to like 450 or something. It's just not needed. So right now, at least, I'm gonna have to put this in Lamau because it just doesn't fit the meta at the moment. No one's really using this. There's just so much better things you could be doing than slapping a defender on your team. It just doesn't really make sense. Caesar really is the only exception, and she doesn't even have to run this set. You know, she's better off running a set more focused on stunning, because they made her, and they made her also like a hybrid stunner who does a lot of impact damage. So yeah, very weird spot. I think they definitely made a mistake with the defender class. I think they almost want people to forget that that is even an archetype, which is kind of funny, but it is what it is. Okay, next up is Puffer Electro. Now, a lot of people write this one off because not many people use it at all, but pen ratio 8% is actually pretty decent. A lot of people forget that if you're running with Rena, who gives a ton of pen, this set and a pen ratio this 5 isn't even that bad anymore. But with that being said, yeah, it's a very niche situation. If you're definitely just running with, you have to run a disc 5 as a pen, and then you have to use Rena as well. So it is very, very niche, very, very niche. And that 4-piece, I mean, it's okay. There aren't any characters which rely extremely heavily on their ultimate right now. So yeah, it's just a very weird disc, but I wouldn't say it's the worst disc in the world. But for now, I'm really just going to put it in the mouth. Next one. This is arguably the worst disc in the game. 16% defense, and then upon receiving damage or losing HP, you then take 40% less damage. Please just never run this, never farm this, just don't get hit. Like, it's just not worth it at all. This is a terrible disc. There is no reason you should ever run this disc. It's trash. And it's like, you only take 40% less damage for 2.5 seconds, and you can't trigger it again for another 15 seconds, which is just so stupid. So yeah, whatever. It's trash. Next up, we have Swing Jazz. So it has a very unique two-piece, being energy regen, so supports really do want it. And it is specifically used for the two-piece because, unfortunately, like I said, Astral Voice has essentially outclassed Swing Jazz in every aspect. Just getting this to 2 stacks out of 3 gives you 1% more damage than Swing Jazz has, right? This gives 16%, this gives 15%. And getting 2 getting 2 quick assists is not difficult at all. So this has been completely outclassed from a 4-piece perspective, but the 2-piece is still useful. Most of the supports are going to be running 4-piece Astral Voice and then 2-piece this for the energy regen, just because energy regen is good. But yes, the 4-piece has been completely outclassed. If it wasn't for the 2-piece, this would definitely go here or even Lamau here because it's just not used anymore. Okay, next up is Thunder Metal. Again, this is just a Thunder version of this. It's really just going to go here. It's... yeah, the 2-piece, not useful anymore. And the 4-piece, 28% attack. That's not bad for a shocked enemy. But a lot of the constantly attacking electro characters just have other stuff that's just better. So it's been completely outclassed. Next up is one of the big boys, which is Woodpecker Electro. So the 2-piece is fantastic. 8% crit is so good. It's enough that it helps cap out builds, and it's not too much that it's going to overcap people. It is pretty much perfect for a 2-piece. You know, it is in that same tier as Branch and Blade Song. 9 times out of 10, when you look at a crit-based character who has really high build, it's going to be one of these two, whichever one they need, essentially. Now the 4-piece is just basically an unconditional 9% increased attack. It's just generically good, and funny enough, it's still used today. When a character is released and they don't have a specific set, which does happen, just look at Evelyn, look at Hugo coming out right now. They do not have a set specifically for them, and what happens? They always fall back onto Woodpecker Electro. It just is what it is. It has to go up here. It's still useful today. It doesn't feel bad to farm it. You know, it's always realistically going to be useful until they release another one with 2-piece crit rate. It just is what it is. And now we have Shockstar Disco. Well, this one, again, has to go up here. It has really stood the test of time. There isn't another disc which a stunner just wants. There's no other disc, no matter what they release. They haven't released one that's better than Shockstar Disco. It gives 6% impact and then basically makes their entire kit do 20% more days. What is not to love? Every stun character, you can pretty comfortably say that they would want this unless you're trying to build them as damage. You know, the most recent one being Trigger. You know, some people definitely use Shadow Harmony when they want to do more damage and stuff like that, but for general purpose, you're just going to run this and you're going to stun like crazy. So yeah, there really is no reason to not run this on a stunner. It's too generically good, and they haven't really released anything to dethrone it yet. And that pretty much wraps it up for the Drive This tier list. Let me know what you guys think. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Don't be too harsh on me. This is just my opinion. But yeah, look forward to the video coming out next week with the Hugo. Feel free to like, subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.